I read this book, Venomous Lumpsucker, and you might be tempted to think that the eponym is a succubus or an alien or something in the horror genre, but in actual fact, this is not a horror book. It's a very funny book. And Venomous Lumpsucker refers to an earthling, a particularly intelligent and vindictive cleaner fish. But given the subject matter of this book, as I read on pretty early on, I couldn't help wondering whether Venomous Lumpsucker really referred to a fish or, in actual fact, referred to the reader. You might even say Venomous Lumpsucker is a red herring. Ha 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 ha. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry enough to edit that out. But after all, this is actually a book about the destruction of the natural world. And are we humans not sucking the biosphere dry at a fairly rapid rate at that? I first heard about this book from Sunbeam Jess, whose channel I will link below. Really nice reviewer, very good taste in books. And I was intrigued at the time when I heard the review, but I didn't go chasing the book because I didn't really know what to make of it, so I didn't prioritize it. But it found its way into my hands, and I'm very glad that it did. I hadn't read anything like what Ned Beauman does here. I haven't read anything like Venomous Lumpsucker. It's a bizarre blend of speculative environmental fiction with thriller elements, and it's also dark comedy. And it was this last element, the comic element, that made me surprise myself, because normally I don't find anthropogenic mass extinctions funny, and normally I would say they're more likely to draw tears of desolation than real laughter from me. Sick laughter. I have read that Venomous Lumpsucker and some other books by Ned Beauman plays at the edges of the category of systems novels, but it doesn't quite make that category. Excuse me, I have a terrible cold. It seems I always have a cold. So my voice is very funny. I normally speak like this. He does introduce quite a few complex ideas through the novel form, and I have a lot of respect for him because although he does this, his novel at the same time is highly entertaining. It's whimsical, even. It's impudent. And I have a lot of respect for Ned Beauman as a writer. He's clearly very intelligent, very erudite, and insightful and funny guy. And his awards record bears this out too. The story takes place in a near future in which capitalism has won or continues to win against the biosphere, a Pyrrhic victory against the life support systems of the planet on which we depend. And we are noticeably more technologically advanced, but not enough to save us. And the world has deteriorated, not just in terms of the ecology and climate, but also politically as well. Certain prominent, once powerful states have fallen off the world stage. One has isolated itself to such a degree that it is referred to as the Hermit Kingdom, and the other one has embarrassed itself so much so that it's not a topic for polite conversation, and when it is alluded to, people look at their feet and sort of try to change the topic. You will have a good chance, I think, of guessing which states Beauman is referring to. In this world, the extinction rate is high. It's estimated that we're losing about 10,000 species every year, which is, by the way, at the lower end of real world estimates, because real world estimates suggest that we might be losing as many as 100,000 species every year. In the book, and not in the book, the human relationship with the rest of the natural world, with non-human species, is complicated. Conserving species is simply incompatible with economic growth. And despite there being a militant presence that dissents against the industry of destruction with ballistic tumors and attempts to engineer non-human revenge on humans, extractive industry has to be allowed to continue to do its thing. There has to be a trade-off. So a system that is devised to ostensibly mitigate biodiversity loss, and it simultaneously allows industry to kind of have a cop-out. This is a system of extinction credits that can be purchased by conglomerates or governments to license actions that lead to the extinction of species. Sound familiar? These extinction credits fluctuate according to market mechanisms. So there are lobbyists, behind the scenes trying to make the price drop by changing the definition of extinction and things like that. Extractive industry is further enabled by the existence of biobanks that harvest different species genomes and tissue samples and information about their place in the habitat and in the ecosystem and that kind of thing. And these biobanks are set up with the promise of reincarnating species in the future when technology allows them to do that. But that's a promise that they're not justified in making, because thus far, with the technology that's been developed in the book, the only attempt made to resurrect a species resulted in a most nightmarish outcome. The two very different main characters are thrown together in a partnership when the last known remaining habitat of the venomous lumpsucker is threatened by a mining project to be carried out by Brahmasamudra Mining Company, which he works for as an executive and she as a freelancer. Resaint, who is the freelancer and an ethologist or an animal intelligence assessor, is charged with determining whether the venomous lumpsucker is intelligent, it's a very amorphous and ill-defined word, or not. And the reason for this is because Brahmasamudram wants to mine its last habitat, so it needs to buy the right to make the species go extinct. And if the species is unintelligent, they only have to pay 1 credit. But if the species is intelligent, then they would have to pay 13 credits, which would be more expensive for the company. Resaint discovers that the venomous lumpsucker engages in some very human social strategic behavior, and therefore she singles it out as a really good candidate for her rather strange plan, which I'll keep you in the dark about. And so therein lies her motive for joining up with Halyard, the other main character, because it's in her interest to keep the venomous lumpsucker alive until she's accomplished her goals. Halyard has very different motivations for preventing the venomous lumpsucker from going extinct, whereas Resaint has ideals that motivate her. Halyard doesn't seem to have any ideals at all. He's a gustatory hedonist and misses the flavor of food, because the biosphere is so impoverished now that most food has lost its flavor, and only the very rich can generally afford to eat food that retains its natural appeal. So Halyard is driven to earn money to feed this expensive addiction of his, this addiction to tasty food. And at the very least, if you can't feed that addiction, if tasty food goes out of the world, he has a second choice addiction, and that is Inzadernal, which is a drug that has an off-label use, and that is that it allows you to eat your food without the suffering of having to eat food that doesn't have any flavour or that tastes bad. Halyard earns quite good money working at Brahmasamudra Mining Corporation, but he wants to grow his wealth more rapidly so that he can really guarantee that he'll have a lifetime supply of Inzadernal or good food, at least occasionally. And he wants to invest in the market, but he has an expensive nigiri habit, and he hasn't been good with his money. So he takes advantage of his position as an executive at Brahmasamudram to make a very risky bet. He tries to short the market. Again, I don't want to reveal too much about what's going on here, because a very delicious part of the book were the twists and turns and the unforeseen elements, and that's kind of what makes it so funny as well sometimes. So I won't steal your enjoyment, But I'll just say that this risky choice that Halyard makes is what propels him onto the same path as Resaint. Thereafter, the book begins to read more like a thriller as the two undergo an absurd and mostly fast-paced adventure to save the last of the lumpsuckers. This audacious book did something that few books managed to do for me. It made me guffaw, it made me chuckle, it made me giggle. It reminded me of my love of perverse humour, of dark comedy, of laughing out loud at things that scare the shit out of me, like the destruction of the natural world, existential threats, like that. Something about the horror behind the humour seems to add a perverse frisson to the comedy. Like, I suppose you could liken it to tickling or some kink where you're like, please do, but please don't, but please do. Anyway, there's some solace to be found, I think, in laughing at things that are deeply unfunny. I know it's ironic, but I think that it works as a coping mechanism as long as you don't lean too heavily on it. Comedy notwithstanding, through one character's eyes in particular, probably the most sober character in the book, the mass extinction overshadows everything, and it is, in the face of it, all the things we worry about are kind of sweet nothings. For this character, she's totally in awe of the improbability and the magnitude of evolution and life on Earth. And it's easy to empathize with this if you take even 1 minute to just meditate on the brain-shattering triumph that is every single species on this planet. She likens the human-caused crisis to a black hole, the black hole, and that just, she also describes it as a cosmic singularity. This idea that, I don't know why I'm smiling, any other moral question that gets into the gravitational pull of the black hole just vanishes in thin air. It just can't compare with the enormity of what we're doing to life on Earth. And for this character, the fact that a single species in the universe, humans, are the perpetrators of this unfathomable space-time bending event affects her sense of justice such that she seeks retribution, not even retribution, she seeks to move in the direction of equilibrium on behalf of the animals, just to be part of the force that is bending that the scales of justice back in the direction of the non-humans, because she thinks that the act is such a crime. For a lot of readers, I think that this character, who is, as I said, actually quite a sober character, her motives are going to seem quite strange and hard to relate to. But I think that is partly because we as a culture don't reflect enough on the natural world and how we impact it, and what a loss it is to impoverish it, to potentially lose the majority of species on Earth because of our actions that could have been prevented. It's very hard for us to shed our cultural belief that we are supreme on Earth, a supreme species, and then as a consequence of that, we devalue other species. But I think it's important for us to remind ourselves to regain a little bit of humility. We've been around for an extremely short time, evolutionarily speaking. Maybe a particularly unfortunate hiccup in the history of life on Earth. And lest we forget, we are just evolved animals. We did get lucky, I think. It's hard to tell at the moment. But we are deeply related to everything else, and everything that we see as special in us was built on what we share with them. And we don't have the upper hand in every race either. My point is here that if you would consider the loss of the human species as an inconceivable tragedy, just consider for a moment that we are currently in a time where we may be losing 100,000 species in a single year. An Edward L. McCord quote at the beginning of the book expresses more eloquently than I ever could the value of other species and the corresponding loss that we should be trying to avoid. Every living thing on earth today, every fish, beetle, mammal, and tree, is the forward point in a flame of life that has remained aglow throughout billions of years. A phenomenon that evolved through a fathomless stream of events to become unique and unrepeatable in the universe. And that's from The Value of Species, McCord's book. Every single one of them. The air of an unbroken line of triumphs all the way back to the beginning of life on Earth. The mass extinction that we're in at the moment, the sixth mass extinction, is one of those, in my mind, gargantuan topics that doesn't get the attention that it ought to be getting. And it's refreshing and greatly appreciated by me that was made the focal point of this novel. And for that alone, I have enormous respect for Ned Beauman. But Venomous Lumpsucker is also an intelligent and puckish and hilarious sometimes book that tickles the intellect and the funny bone right to the end of the book. I'm a stickler about spoilers, and I hope I haven't really given any. And, you know, some people might feel that I've given too little of the book. So let me put it this way to kind of excuse that. Much about what's enjoyable in the book has to do with the unexpectedness of the book. The absurdity of things sometimes seems like it's just put there for the sheer fun of it. And but other times it's just humanity as we are cast in a fresh light to highlight our genuine absurdity. It's us as we are, you know, like frivolous and short-sighted and puerile, hedonistic and illogical, but also capable of deep empathy and awe in the face of reality, and courage and selflessness and ingenuity, capable of stopping this headlong, maniacal descent into another bottleneck for life on Earth if we could only get our priorities straight. Venomous Lumpsucker got a 4-star from me. That's kind of where I felt I was hitting in terms of enjoyment. And was it a perfect book? No. Was it a brilliant book? Yes. And any criticisms that I have seem like nitpicking. So they're just little issues with humour, which are also to do with taste, you know. Thanks again for sticking through to the end of the review. I will be trying some different styles of videos, I think, going forward. I appreciate all your constructive feedback and any recommendations or anything you'd like to see on this channel. And more than anything, I appreciate the time that you give to watching my videos and the opportunity for me to connect with people who dig what I dig. Until next time, stay well, stay curious, and stay reading.